Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. I welcome you to this lecture of macroeconomics. In the very first lecture on this course, we'll introduce you to this concept of macroeconomics. As we all know, modern economics has two major branches of economic studies, microeconomics and macroeconomics. Now, compared to microeconomics, macroeconomics is relatively a new field of study. Until the 1930s, the economic works were essentially limited to the study of microeconomics. It was only in the 1936, with the revolutionary book of John Maynard Keynes, that this subject of macroeconomics gained ground. In his book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, Keynes talked about that how the aggregate concepts are way more important than the study of only the individual concepts. So, in today's lecture, we will be talking about defining macroeconomics. Also, this lecture will introduce you to the basic concepts and variables of macroeconomics. We will be then going forward to a very interesting concept of circular flow of income. Now, when we try to define economics, as students of economics, we all know that attempts to define economics precisely have not yet produced universally accepted definition. However, some comprehensive definitions of macroeconomics will definitely give us a broad understanding of what this subject talks about. Now, some of the famous economists have tried to define the concept of macroeconomics. Now, let us have a look at them. The first definition we will be talking about is by Professor T.A. Samuelson. What does he have to say? According to him, macroeconomics is the study of the behavior of the economy as a whole. I'm sure all of you have already been introduced to the concept of microeconomics. Now, micro, the word itself tells you that we are having a study of an individual small unit. But as Professor Samuelson is saying, he says that macroeconomics is trying to study the behavior of a larger whole. It is trying to understand that how an economy as a whole behaves. How does it operate? So, the concept is broader in nature, whereas the concept of microeconomics is smaller in nature. So, a very simple way of understanding macroeconomics is that we are talking about a larger whole. We are talking about the economy as a whole. The second very interesting definition is given by Professor Ackley. What does he say? He says macroeconomics is dealing with economic affairs in the large. That is, it is taking the larger picture into consideration and then trying to understand that how the economic activities are taking place. Now, let me read this definition for you. What does Professor Ackley say? He says macroeconomics deals with economic affairs in the large. It concerns with the overall dimensions of economic life. That is, macroeconomics is trying to understand not only one individual, not only one particular firm. We are talking about all the economic agents, how they are behaving in the economy, what type of decisions they are taking, and how those decisions have an impact on all the sectors of the economy and in turn the overall economy of a particular nation or even the world economy. So, what we can understand is that macroeconomics is essentially what? It is the study of the behavior and the performance of the economy as a whole. So, we are taking a departure from a micro view to a broader view. Whereas when we study microeconomics, we try to understand that how one consumer behaves, how one producer makes decisions, how a firm decides how much it produces. Whereas when we are talking about macroeconomics, we are saying that the question is of all the resources available to an economy or a nation and how it should be decided what to produce, how much to produce, and how to produce. So the central focus of macroeconomics is shifting from a smaller unit to an aggregate unit or a larger unit. So I hope you understand the importance of macroeconomics as a subject. Now a very relevant question arises in everybody's mind. Then what is the need to study if it is such a relatively new field which gained prominence only after the Great Depression of 1930s? Why is it so important to understand or read macroeconomics or to study macroeconomics? So let us understand the importance of this subject. The first is you study macroeconomics so that you understand the working of the economy. Why? Because we are talking about not only one individual, we are talking about the larger whole. We are trying to understand that how consumption is taking place in the economy, what type of investment is taking place, how the government is functioning in this economy in order to get the desired objectives. What has been the growth rate of the economy? For example, if somebody asks you a simple question, how has India performed in the last 1 decade? What will be our answer? We will try to see that what has been the national income of the country in the last decade. This means if we decompose it further, we will try to see that how the various sectors of the economy have performed, how the primary sector has performed, how the industry has performed, how the service sector has performed. This we cannot understand if we study people in isolation in smaller units. To understand that how economy is working, we need to understand these aggregates. Hence, the study of macroeconomics will help you to understand that how economy has performed over a period of time, how it is working today, what is the contribution of the various sectors of the economy. That we only understand after going through the various concepts of macroeconomics. The second important point as to why we study macroeconomics is because when we see the planners, if today I say that there is a problem of unemployment in India and the government recognizes this problem, they have to tackle this problem. How will they tackle this problem? They will design various economic policies. Now, we all know that whatever policies, whether it is the fiscal policy, whether it is the monetary policy, whether it is the industrial policy, whatever policy decision the government takes, it is not only for one sector. Those decisions, those policies are made at the aggregate level. If, for example, we see the budget coming wherein certain personal income taxes are changed, it will not only affect me as an individual or you as an individual. It will have an impact on everybody in the economy who is some way or the other paying the personal income taxes. So whatever economic policies are being made, They are made by studying what is happening in the economy. Is it desired that way, or we need to do something about it? So whatever interventions the government does by way of designing economic policies, it is through the study of macroeconomics. Third, it is very useful to the planners for preparing economic plans for the country's development. As I've just discussed here, if the desired growth rate of the country is lesser than what is expected, for example, if we say that if India has to get into the league of the fastest growing nations of the world, we need to have a GDP of 8.5%. If we see today that what is the growth rate of GDP, we say, for example, it is 7%. This means that there is a gap between what is desired and what is actually happening. So this gap of 1.5% growth of GDP, we are expecting it to be 8.4%, or we want it to be 8.5%, whereas it is only 7%. This gap of 1.5%, the country's planners will try to achieve by formulating various policies which will be again a part of your macroeconomics. Therefore, this field of study grew when the Great Depression of 1930s was there, because previous to that the focus was on only microeconomics, assuming that every economy is self-correcting in nature. However, it was only realized in the Keynesian era, which we say after the 1936, that we understood that how important it is for the government to intervene when the economy is not functioning or not performing the way it should be. Therefore, the genesis of this field of macroeconomics. And then macroeconomics is very helpful if we want to compare ourselves with the other nations of the world. We've many times come across that World Bank has divided the countries of the world on the basis of the income. High income countries, middle income countries, low middle income countries, low income countries. Now, what is this income? Income of a nation is taken as a criteria for dividing the countries. This means income of the nation is again an aggregate criteria, which will be a part of what? Your macroeconomics. So, if we are trying to compare ourselves with, let us say, China, what is the thing we do? We will see that how China is growing. What is the international trade of China? What is the balance of payment of China? And what is the trade of India? What is the balance of payment of India? Right? So these concepts are only a part of macroeconomics. So if we want to compare two countries or a group of countries, it will only be possible when we know about the various concepts, variables, and the measurement which take place only in macroeconomics. So, micro and macro, I will again emphasize that these two areas of study of economics, both micro and macro, are very much complementary to each other. It is not that we study macroeconomics and we forget micro. No, because micro is the basic building block, whereas macroeconomics is making you give a larger picture. It is helping you to understand that how a country, a state is performing. How do you measure the performance, and how do you ensure that the desired performance results are achieved? Now, next thing that we discuss are the various concepts of macroeconomics. We have understood that how macroeconomics is important. What has been the genesis of this field of macroeconomics? Now let us now give an overview of what are the various concepts of macroeconomics. The first concept we will start with are the stocks, and the flows. We have already said that macroeconomics is the measurement of the aggregates. Now this measurement of the aggregates can be of two types. One, you can measure something at a particular point of time. Right. For example, I ask you, right now, how much money do you have in your pocket? Right. So what will you say? You will pick up your purse and tell me how much money do you have in your pocket. That is at a point of time. At this point of time, I have 100 rupees in my pocket. So that measurement is at a point of time, and in macroeconomics, we call it as a stock concept. Examples of stock concepts are money supply, labor force, and the debt. How much people are there who are willing to work? Labor force. Debt, how much money I have taken as a loan at this point of time, is a concept of stock. Another concept compared to the stock concept is when you are measuring an aggregate over a period of time, over an interval of time. That is called as a flow concept. For example, I say, how much money are you spending every month? What am I trying to ask you? I am trying to ask you, tell me over a period of last 30 days, how much money have you been spending? This means I am asking you something to measure over a certain period of time. Whereas stock was something at a point of time, whereas the concept of flow is something of measurement over an interval of time or over a period of time. Right? Examples of flows of measurement in macroeconomics is, for example, income, which you earn over a period of time of a given interval of time, expenditure, which you do over a period of time, or the savings, which you do or a country does over a period of time. On a very simple way of understanding this is this particular diagram. Very simple to understand. There is a tap. The water is flowing from that tap at a given speed, and this water is being stored in a can. The volume of water which is already in the can, we will say it is a stock. For example, I say I have right now 1 liter of water in my tank. That is a stock. But we see that water is already also flowing in. So the flow of this water, for example, I keep the tap open for next 10 minutes. This water will keep on flowing. This is a flow concept. So I hope it is very clear to all of you that what is a stock and what is a flow. Stock is what? Stock is a variable or a measurement which you do at a particular point of time. For example, how much water is in this can right now is a stock concept. Whereas a flow is something which you try to measure over a particular interval, over a period of time. For example, how much water is flowing from this tap is a flow concept. So, both the concepts we'll be using in measurement, stocks as well as flows. The next concept we have is of partial equilibrium analysis and general equilibrium analysis. What is an equilibrium before that? Equilibrium, we say, is something, a point of rest. Something which you are achieving as a balance. That is called as an equilibrium. Disequilibrium is the opposite, wherein there is a movement, there is a imbalance. One side is heavier, one side is lower. We say there is an imbalance or there is a disequilibrium. What is equilibrium? When something is at balance, something it has rest. So, objective of any economy, any market, whether it is a product market, whether it is a factor market, whatever it is, the objective will be to achieve this kind of an equilibrium. Now, equilibrium can be analyzed in two ways. One is called as partial, other is called as general. What is partial equilibrium? We say a partial equilibrium is analysis of a part of an economy or an economic phenomena. When we study a phenomenon or when we study a one part of an economy and analyze it, it is called as partial equilibrium analysis. For example, if I just try to understand that how equilibrium is being achieved in the product market, I forget about the factor market. I am just trying to understand that what happens in the product market. That is called as a partial equilibrium. Why? Because my focus is only on one part of the economy. Or I am just trying to understand one particular economic phenomena. Okay, so if we are doing a partial equilibrium analysis, the focus is only on the core area of economic policy with an assumption that other variables will remain constant. That is, your focus is only on one particular aspect, assuming that the other things will not change. For example, if I am saying that I want to give an impetus to the agriculture sector of our country. Okay, I want to bring an equilibrium in the demand and supply, whatever total demand and total supply of food grains in the country. Therefore, I will try to push up the supply of this by giving certain incentives to the farmers. Okay, I will not think that by giving a subsidy to the farmer or by giving some type of economic help to the farmer, what happens to the other sectors of the economy, that is secondary sector or the tertiary sector. Why? Because my focus is only on one particular sector, that is the agriculture sector. I assume that the rest of the sectors will remain constant. That is called as a partial equilibrium analysis. On the other hand, we have a general equilibrium analysis wherein we try to analyze the whole economic system. We don't assume that only one sector I have to take care of. I say that if I take an economic policy, it will definitely have an impact on the sector for which I am making this policy. But it might also have an impact on the other sectors because somehow or the other, all of them are interrelated to each other. As we carry on, think of the same example of the agriculture sector. If the government is giving subsidies to the agriculture sector so that equilibrium between food grains is achieved, it will definitely have an impact on the secondary sector also, because if I am asking farmers to produce more, they will need more fertilizers. Fertilizers will not be produced in the agriculture sector. For that, they have to look to whom? They have to look to the secondary sector. So there will be an impact on the secondary sector as well. In a general equilibrium analysis, this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to analyze the economic system as a whole. We will be seeing that what happens that if one sector certain policy is made and implemented, what happens to the other interrelated sector or the factors. So, a general equilibrium analysis tries to analyze the system as a whole, whereas in partial, as the name is indicating, we are only trying to analyze a particular part of the economy. In partial, again I repeat, we assume that the other variables are constant, whereas in general equilibrium analysis, this does not happen. Right? Now moving further, another very important and interesting concept, static analysis and dynamic analysis. As we've just seen that analysis can be partial or it can be general. Similarly, an analysis can be a static one or a dynamic one. Now the term static has been taken from the Greek word statikos, which means constant. So in a static macro model, we assume that there is no change in the size of the economy and other variables. It doesn't mean that there is nothing happening in the economy. A static analysis means that changes are there, but overall certain variables are not changing. What variables are not changing? For example, population is not changing. For example, supply of capital is not changing. Methods of production are not changing. Forms of business organizations are not changing. And the wants of the people are not changing. Okay, so a economic static does not mean that there is no change. What we are trying to say is that this model assumes that certain variables are not changing. What we are changing is only what we are studying. For example, the ordinary theory of demand and supply is an example of a static analysis. What does it do? It only builds the relationship between demand and supply as they are supposed to be at any moment of time. We say that what is the demand, what is the supply, we make the curves and try to achieve the equilibrium, but assuming that there is no change in the income of the people, there is no change in the population, right? There is no change in the taste and preferences. So certain variables we are keeping constant in order to make this particular model. So such an analysis is called as a static analysis. Why is it used then? If certain variables are kept constant, then why do we do static analysis? See, the static analysis is an approach which is used to make theoretical formulations, for making generalizations. If we are trying to theorize something, if we are trying to formulate a particular model or a theory which can be generalized, we use a static analysis. Okay. On the contrast, we have something called as dynamic analysis. Again, the word dynamic has been taken from the Greek word dynamikos, which means change. Okay, now a dynamic analysis in macroeconomics means that whatever model or whatever we are studying, it is under changing conditions. That is, things which we had kept constant earlier in a dynamic model means we are trying to change those variables also. What did we keep constant in static? 5 things. What 5 things? We said there is no change in population. We said there is no change in supply of capital. There is no change in methods of production. There is no change in form of business organization. And there is no change in the wants of people. But when we do dynamic analysis, we are trying to change these variables also. So, it studies the factors and forces that lead to equilibrium or disequilibrium in the economy. That is, a dynamic analysis, we are trying to determine the path of that equilibrium or the disequilibrium. From a point of rest A, if we move to another point of rest B, from A to B, how did we move? What variable moved? How did they behave? If we do this study, this is called as a dynamic analysis. Static one, it was not path determined. We just tried to keep certain variables constant, study something, and then theorize. Whereas a dynamic analysis is more path determined because we try to understand that what are the factors and forces which are leading something to change from one point to another. Okay, so these are the basic concepts of macroeconomics. Now let us go further to what are the variables which we will be studying. What are variables? Macroeconomic variables are basically indicators or they are main signposts which signal at the current trends in the economy. Okay, for example, we read it very often, we hear it very often that the GDP of country has fallen down. Inflation has increased compared to the previous period. Balance of payment problem is there. So macroeconomic variables are basically those indicators which we immediately look for if we want to understand that what is happening in the economy. Now for any economic planner, the four variables which they understand is, first is the economic growth. That is, compared to the previous period or compared to the base period, what has been the growth in the economy? Because ultimately the objective of any economy is to have a growth. Nobody wants to have a static economy. We wish or we plan that there is a desired rate of growth. So the first variable is the economic growth, which is measured through GDP, GNP or national income. The second variable that we look for is the inflation. What is inflation? Inflation means the general rise in prices of a given basket of goods. How is inflation measured? Inflation is measured by consumer price index or wholesale price index. What do? We try to see, compared to the previous period, how the prices of the similar goods have changed. Why it is important? Because a very high rate of inflation means corrosion of your purchasing power. That your purchasing power will get devalued, it will get reduced if prices rise. So any economic planner would like to see that what is happening to the inflation in the economy. Third is the balance of payment. This is very important because we are living in a globalized era where no country is isolated from the rest of the world. We have constant interactions with the rest of the world by trade of goods and services, by movement of labor from one country to another country, movement of capital from one country to another country. So balance of payment is basically tracking all these movements, that how much foreign exchange has flowed in the country and how much foreign exchange has gone out of the country. A poor balance of payment has not only an impact on our exchange rate, but it also has an impact on the inflation and the economic growth. So a deficit in balance of payment may be a cause of concern. Hence, it is one indicator which is used to see that how economy is performing in the external sector. The fourth variable we talk about is employment. That is, the labor force in the country, are they getting work or not? Out of, let us say, 100 people who are looking for work, how many are actually getting work? A high unemployment, that is, people if they are unable to get work, highlights to the fact that there is some problem in the economic growth. When will people not get work? When the employers do not have enough capacity to give them work because there is lack of demand. So employment is a very important criteria to see what is happening in the economy. For example, in the latest pandemic situation, we have seen many people losing work, and hence the unemployment of not only our country but across the world has increased. So in order to tackle the problem of unemployment, government came up with many measures so that small and medium enterprises in India, which give a lot of labor employment, get an impetus and start employing more people. So these are the four most important signposts because they signal to the economic trends of a country. What are those? Economic growth, inflation, balance of payment and employment. So whenever anybody asks you that what are the four things or what are the variables which you should look for to know that how India is performing, you say we look at economic growth, we look at what is inflation, we look at the balance of payment of our country, we look at the employment situation. So just a quick recap of what we have done till now. We have understood what do you mean by macroeconomics. We have understood the various concepts of macroeconomics, stocks and flows, partial and general equilibrium, and static and dynamic equilibrium. We also had a look at what are the variables which are used in our macroeconomic analysis so that we know that how macroeconomic analysis or what are the economic indicators, how they are performing. To begin the study of basic macroeconomics, let us first introduce you to the concept of circular flow of income and expenditure. The circular flow of income forms the basis of all macroeconomic models of the economy, and it is very imperative that we first understand this model if we want to understand the various macroeconomic aggregates and concepts like national income, aggregate demand, and aggregate supply. We all see that economic activities keep on taking place by various economic agents. Seemingly routine activities like going to work, coming back, in the end of the month, getting some salary, going to the market, purchasing goods and services, have a lot of implications on the economy. What happens is what we call as an economic activity. The economic activity is an activity wherein one economic agent is interacting with another economic agent and generating two types of flows. What flows? One is called as a real flow or a product flow. Other is called as a money flow. And the circular flow of income is the simplest and the easiest way to understand the activities which is generating the real flow and the money flow. If we want to define that what does a circular flow income model show? The circular flow of income describes the movement of goods and services and income among the different sectors or the different agents of the economy. What happens is, it basically tells you an interdependence that is taking place between two basic sectors. We are saying that, for example, you are going and working. So what are you doing? You are an employee working for another person, B, who is your employer. When you go to work, what are you doing? You are basically rendering your factor services to your employer. So you are giving a flow of services, which we call as a real flow. Now you go and work, he utilizes your services and pays you as something. This means that you as an economic agent have generated a real flow in terms of selling services, and the employer has taken your services and generated a money flow to you in terms of your wages or salaries. So this circular flow is showing what? That a person A is going and working, getting some services, giving some services and getting some money. So these always in an economic activity, we will see that there is a real flow as well as there is a money flow. And these flows generally move in an opposite direction in a circular manner. Hence, we say that the entire economic system can be viewed as a circular flow of income and expenditure where an economic agent is giving one service and in turn of that service, which we call as a quid pro quo, getting another type of a flow. So for a real flow, you will see a money flow, and for a money flow, you will see a corresponding real flow. Okay, defining formally the meaning of real flow, we say the real flow refers to the flow of factor services and the flow of goods and services. Money flow is for the real flow. If we have given somebody a service, money flow will be defined as the money which is generated from one sector to another because a real flow or a product flow has taken place. So that is the circular flow of income and expenditure. That is, in an economy where various economic activities are taking place, where various economic agents are interacting with each other, in this process of interaction, two types of flows are being generated, a real flow or a product flow, and corresponding to a real or a product flow, we will see a money flow. Okay, as we have just given example, you go and work, so you are giving a real flow. Because you are working, you are getting some money. That is called as a money flow. So they are opposite in direction. You have given your services to your employers, that is the real flow. But your employer has paid you for taking that service, that is a money flow. So what do we see? These flows are going in an opposite direction. So that is why it is called as circular flow of income and expenditure. Now, when we understand the circular flow of income and expenditure, we first should understand that any economy is divided in the following four sectors. What are they? One is the household sector. Who are households? The sector includes the various individuals in the economy. And the primary function of this sector is to provide the factors of production. The factors of production are what? There are four basic factors of production that we take in economics: land, labor, capital, and enterprise. These are the four sectors or the four resources which we take from the household. So households are essentially what? Households are essentially the providers of the four factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, and enterprise. Also, the households are the consumers of various goods and services. Produced by whom? Produced by another sector of the economy, which is called as firms. And what are these firms? These are the firms, also the ones which are giving the payments to the households for the use of their factors of production. So the first sector in the economy which we have talked about is the household sector. Who are households? Households are those sectors which are providing the factors of production in the economy. What factors of production? Land, labor, capital, and enterprise. Also, household sectors are the ones which are purchasing or which are the consumers of goods and services. The second sector that we talk about is the business firms. Business firms, this sector includes all business entities, corporations, and partnerships. The primary function of this sector is to produce goods and services for sale in the market and make factor payments to the household sector. Means this is that sector which is utilizing the factors of production given by households and paying them for the use of their services and also producing the goods and services which eventually the households are going to purchase. So business firms, it can be any type of business enterprise. It can be a partnership firm, it can be a corporation. So any firm which is utilizing the factors of production in order to produce goods and services is called as a business firm. The third sector in the economy is the government sector. And this sector includes center, state and the local governments. So the governments at all the three levels are included in this sector, which is called as the government sector. The prime function of this sector is to regulate the functioning of the economy. As we've just discussed, that economic planning is done by the government, the economic policies are formulated by the government. So the prime function of this sector is to see that whether the economy is functioning properly or not. Now the government sector incurs both revenue as well as capital expenditure. That is, it is going to incur expenditure because it is going to use the services as well as it is going to invest in the infrastructure. The government also earns revenue. How does it earn revenue? It earns revenue from taxes as well as the non-taxes sources. It also incurs expenditure for providing us the essential public services like provision of hospitals, like provision of colleges, like provision of roads, like provision of bridges, ports, airports. So they all are provided by the government sector. The fourth sector that we talk about is the foreign sector. This foreign sector includes transactions with the rest of the world. As we have just seen earlier, balance of payment is basically due to this particular foreign sector. Now, foreign trade that we have can be in terms of exports or it can be imports. What are exports? Something which we sell to the rest of the world is called as an export. And if we buy goods and services from the rest of the world, it is called as imports. So, foreign sector, we are talking about purchase and sale of goods and services and also purchase and sale of factor services and capital. So, that is included in your foreign sector. So, when we talk about the circular flow of money, we will be seeing that how these four sectors interact with each other. And then we will be understanding this circular flow of income and expenditure. Using these four sectors, the circular flow of money, so of income, can be divided as a two-sector model, a three-sector model, or a four-sector model. In a two-sector model, as the name is indicating, we will be only having two sectors. This two-sector model is also called as a closed economy model. Okay, what are the two sectors that we are taking here? We will be taking households and we will be taking firms. We have just discussed what are households. We are saying household sector is the one which is providing various factors of production to the firms. Also, household is that sector which is the purchaser of goods and services produced by the firms. What are firms? Firms are business enterprises which are utilizing the services of the factor services of the households and producing goods and services. Now we'll just see that how circular flow model operates. This is a two-sector model, again I'm repeating, which is also called as a closed economy model. What are the two sectors? Households and the firms. Now what happens? We are saying that households are the providers of the factors of production, and these factors of production are what? Land, labor, capital and enterprise. Now all these factors of production which are owned by households, see this arrow is going from households and going where? To the other sector of the economy, that is firms. these business enterprises are going to use these factors of production for what? For the production of goods and services. Now, since the firms are using these factors of production, we all know that factors of production have to be rewarded. So, what is the reward? For land, if you utilize, you have to reward it by paying a rent. Right? If you are using labor, you are going to pay them wages. If you are going to use capital, you are going to pay them interest. And if you are going to use their enterprising abilities, entrepreneurial abilities, you are going to pay them the profit. So factors of production are flowing from the households to the firms. Because the firms are utilizing these factors of production, they are going to make them a payment which we called as factor incomes. So, this factor of production flow can be called as a real flow because factors of production are traveling, they are giving their services to the firms. Firms are utilizing their services, paying them in terms of factor income, which is called as a money flow. So you see that how this is circular. This is households are going to firms. Opposite flow is a money flow. So it becomes a circular flow. This is one interaction between households and firms where there is a real flow of factors of production and corresponding to that factors of production real flow, there is an opposite flow from the firms to the household called as factor incomes. Second type of a flow is, now these factors of production have been utilized by the firms in order to produce goods and services. So these goods and services are traveling from the product market to households. We go to the market and purchase. This is what it is. So this means that there is a real flow which has taken place from firms to the households. So if you go to the market and purchase goods and services, what do? We spend. That spending is called as consumption expenditure. So, for this goods and services flow, which is shown in yellow, this goods and services, which is a real flow or a product flow, we see a corresponding money flow taking place from household to firms. So, in this two-sector model, where we have not taken the role of government, we have not taken the foreign sector, we are saying, assuming it is a closed economy with no government, only households and firms if they are there, we are seeing two types of flows in a circular fashion. One, we saw that the factors of production traveled from households to the firms, a real flow. Corresponding to this, we saw a money flow of factor incomes going from firm to household. So here you worked, you earned. A real flow, a money flow. Once you are working, the firms are producing certain goods and services. These goods and services through the product market are traveling to the households. Households, when they purchase, they are spending. So for this goods and services real flow, we see a money flow taking place. So that is a very simple model wherein you only have households and firms, and we are assuming that whatever the households are earning by way of factor incomes, they are spending. So your income is equal to consumption expenditure. That is a basic model. But things are not so easy as we have just shown. You have a very important sector which is called as the government sector. So you have another sector coming in. So now this becomes a three-sector model. Household, firms, third sector is the government sector. We have just seen what does the government do. Government is earning revenue by way of taxes and non-taxes. it is also spending on various public infrastructure, on public services, which it gives to both the households and the firms. Now we'll again see diagrammatically that how government is interacting with households and how government is interacting with firms. See this. We all know that we pay various types of taxes. For example, income tax, GST, which is all the goods and services tax. We pay wealth tax, we pay property tax, we pay water tax. Who do we pay to? We either pay to the central government, we pay to the state government, or we pay to the local government. So households are paying taxes to the government. This is one flow. But what is the government doing? Government is utilizing the services of these households. How? For example, we see many public sector undertakings, we see government departments, we see government colleges, we see government owned schools. What do? We go and work there, no? We say that I am working in Ministry of Finance. This means you are working in a government body. So government is hiring your services as a factor of production. When you are again going and working in that organization, you will be given some factor income. Okay, and then also we see government also giving us certain social transfer payments like pensions which are paid by the government. Correct? Government gives us subsidies. For example, government reduces the price of the domestic cooking gas we have. So this is flowing from the government sector to the household sector. And from the household sector, we are paying taxes to the government. So money is flowing in, money is going back to the government. So for every money flow, there will be a real flow. For a real flow, there will be a money flow. Similarly, the government sector also interacts with the firms. How? Firms also pay tax to the government. For example, the corporate income tax. The firms, when they make profit, they have to pay a tax. So corporate income tax is paid by the firm to the government. Then what does the government do for the firm? Government purchases goods and services by the firms because they are going in the product market. From the product market, government purchases goods and services which are produced in this sector. Also, government give them various kinds of subsidies where it is thought that it is important that particular sector needs to give an impetus. For example, we see KVIC, Khadi and Village Industries. Their government gives them subsidies. We see if an industry is being set up in a backward region, there the government gives certain relaxations to the firms. So this again, there is an interaction of a circular flow between the government and the firms. So this model wherein three sectors are involved, which ones? Households, government, firms, is called as a three-sector circular flow model where we are seeing the interaction not only between firms and households, we are also seeing an interaction between households and government and firms and government. Now moving further, which is called as an open economy model, we introduce the foreign sector. That is, now we are seeing that if the country is interacting with the rest of the world, then what happens? No economy we know again operates in isolation. Somehow or the other, we are interacting with many countries of the world. Okay, so when we are saying a four-sector model, we are saying that another sector has been introduced which is interacting with all these three sectors which were earlier interacting amongst themselves. That is the households, the government and the firms. Now what happens? In the foreign sector also, goods and services are being produced. If there is a certain good which is not being produced in our country or is being produced but not sufficient enough to cater to the domestic demand, what do we do? All these three sectors import from the foreign sector. What is import? Import is when you are purchasing goods from the other countries of the world. We call it as import. For example, in a country like India, we are not very rich in oil. So we are an oil dependent nation. We require oil to be imported from the Middle East. Okay, because we need diesel, we need petrol, but the natural resources are not available. So what do? We import this oil from the foreign sector. When you are importing, what are you doing? You are spending money of our country on another sector of the world or another country of the world. It has not been produced in our country, but the expenditure has been from our country. Similarly, we also see that we also import capital. If, for example, industry is in need of investment and the savings of the country are not enough to cater to the demand of the firms, this sector firms will import capital from the foreign sector. That is, they will get into external borrowing. That is, they will borrow money for the purpose of investment from not from our own country but from the rest of the world. Similarly, we might be importing technology from the rest of the world. So that is our interaction with the foreign sector. Similarly, as we are saying that we are in need of capital, we might be in need of goods, we might be in need of professionals who can do that type of work. The rest of the world or the foreign sector may be also need of all this. So what do then? We export our goods and services to the rest of the world. For example, software services. India exports lot of software services to the rest of the world. How? By doing work for them. Right, we hear of companies like TCS, Infosys. We see so many people going abroad and working on behalf of these companies. So what are we doing? We are doing work from them probably because they need such work and they themselves are unable to do that type of work. Similarly, we export many goods also. So export of goods means that this foreign sector is purchasing goods which have been produced in our country. So they are spending here, but our goods are flowing out. So this is the interaction with the foreign sector. So ultimately money is flowing out to the foreign sector if by way of imports. We also see that the money foreign exchange flowing in through exports. Exports of goods, exports of services, export of technology, okay, even export of manpower. So that all is in your exports of foreign sector. So what do we see here? We see here, as we initially told you, that circular flow model is very important if we want to understand that how the national income is generated, how national income can be calculated. So this is a very comprehensive model and explicitly it tells you that what type of interactions which appear to be very simple and routine have an implication on the economy. However, we also see that there are certain leakages and injections in this circular flow. Now, what is a leakage? Leakage refers to an outflow of income from the circular flow model. In the simple model which we have seen, let us say a two-sector model, we saw that the firms are taking the factors of production from the households and paying them income. And in simple terms, we assumed that whatever income the households are earning, they are spending on the goods which are produced by these firms. But thinking practically, we see that we do not spend the complete income which we earn. What do? We save some part of it. So this means that, for example, if I rendered my service and I earned 1000 rupees and I kept 100 rupees in my pocket to take care of any unforeseen circumstances, this means that money in the circular flow was 100 for 1000. I removed 100 from it and only put back 900. There is a leakage. So saving is a leakage. Similarly, taxes are also a leakage. Now you will ask why taxes are a leakage? Because if again I am saying that I purchased something worth rupees 1000 rupees and the tax on it was 100 rupees, means my pocket I spent 1100 rupees. 100 goes to whom? In form of tax it goes to the government. Okay, and it is only 1000 rupees which goes to the firms. So tax is also a leakage because it is not going directly to the firm. Only 1000 rupees is going, 100 rupees will be going to the government and government will utilize it for the general benefit of the public. The third leakage we have is imports. Why import is a leakage? Import is something which we produce, which we buy from the rest of the world. Something which has not been produced in our country. It has been produced in some other country of the world, but we have purchased it. So money has flown out from our country. But the goods have not been produced in some other country. So what the leakages do is, leakages reduce the volume of income in the circular flow. That is because leakage is what? For example, if you have a bucket full of water, if there is a hole in it, the water will keep on leaking. It will reduce the volume of water in the bucket. So leakage reduces the volume of income in the circular flow. If we say what are leakages again? Leakages are savings plus taxes plus the imports. Now moving on to injections. Injection is just the opposite of leakages. Injection, if we want to define, we say injection is an inflow of income to this circular flow model. That is, something extra is being put in this circular flow of model, which will eventually increase the volume of income in this circular flow. The three main types of injections are investments, government expenditure and exports. Investment is done by the firms, the business firm sector that we have seen. What is investment? We say investment is the total expenditure by the firms on capital expansion. If a company wants to expand its operation, it will be building factories, it will be spending on machines. So what are they doing? They are basically expanding by flowing money in the goods market. Second injection is the government expenditure. Government by way of transfer payments. What are transfer payments? We have just seen, like a social security payment, a pension, income support given by the government. They are all government expenditure. So when the government is injecting this extra money in the economy, not maybe because of a commitment which it has made, but because it feels that the economy needs some boost up, that is again an injection in the circular flow. And then there is an injection from the foreign sector, which is called as export. What is export? Something which is being produced in our country but is being sold to another country. So that money will flow in our country. That is again an injection. So if we briefly want to say what are injections? Injections are investment plus government expenditure plus exports. So the circular flow model explains us that how the various sectors are interdependent on each other and how the economic activity can be measured by using this particular circular flow model. So summarizing our lecture, what we have done today is we have talked about what is macroeconomics. We say macroeconomics is basically the study of aggregates, and it is highly useful if we want to plan and monitor our economy. We also studied that any economic activity consists of two types of flows, real flow and money flow. We also discussed the circular flow of income and interaction between various sectors and how it can be used for the level of economic activity. So happy learning and stay safe.